The College Football Playoff National Championship is one of the most watched sporting events every year. But behind those numbers is an age-old story contest that has been celebrated and has led to some confusion since 1869, largely because of the changes in the National Championship's format throughout history. Here's a breakdown of the title game's changes and some of the significant moments that it's birthed. The retroactive era was the first of many for the championship and was arguably the most disputed in the sport's history. So much so that it helped give rise to the mythical national championship term, as titles were mostly decided by selectors well after the fact, and any playoff system was decades away. Pre-1936, all championships were decided by multiple historian polls, spearheaded by the National Championship Foundation, the Helms Athletic Foundation, and the College Football Researchers Association. The best example of how the format worked was the inaugural season of college football in 1869, where Rutgers and Princeton split the title. The two teams split their season series, leading both to being recognized as champions. Now, the sport began to grow quickly in the following years, putting to rest this time period and forming the AP poll era. From 1936 to 1949, the AP poll was the law of the land, becoming the governing body that picks the national champion at the end of the regular season. Unlike the era before, the poll was the only one recognized, which brought order but also disagreement. For many seasons, there were multiple teams that finished undefeated, and the AP poll picked the champion through whichever team they deemed the best. The poll's lone reign lasted up until 1950, when the United Press International formed the first coaches poll in college football, solely voted on by college coaches across the nation. This was the beginning of the split poll era, from 1950 to 1992, where the UPI rivaled the AP, setting the table for two polls to crown two different national champions. 1954 was the first bump in the road, where the AP poll crowned undefeated Ohio State and the UPI picked undefeated UCLA. This was the first of 13 split titles during this era, and with the formation of other polls over the years, three-way splits were introduced. The sport saw four different splits between 1970 and 1989, and consecutive ones in 1990 and 1991, leading to its breaking point. With fans, teams, and America calling for one national champion, the Bowl Coalition and Bowl Alliance were the first to answer the bell. In 1992, the coalition formed an agreement with major bowls like Orange, Sugar, and Cotton Bowls to host the title game, which would allow teams to forego their conference obligations for select bowls to create a matchup between the number 1 and number 2 teams in the polls. And it worked for the first 2 seasons, but fell apart in year 3 largely because of the Rose Bowl. The New Year's Day bowl game featured the Big Ten and Pac-10 champions, but unlike other bowl games, the Rose Bowl didn't hand over control to the coalition or alliance. This renewed the title game debate in years like 1994, where Penn State was ranked number 2 in the polls, and 1997 Michigan, who was number 1 and undefeated. However, by 1998, the chaos led the Rose Bowl to allow Big Ten and Pac-10 teams to play in the national championship. The result? The Bowl Championship Series era. Now, this is where things start to look like the present-day title game. In 1998, all bowls and conferences allowed their teams to compete in the national championship game. The BCS had 4 bowl games with 8 teams, where the 6 major conference champions received auto bids, and the 2 remaining spots were at-large bids. The number 1 and 2 teams faced each other in the title game. Rankings consisted of the AP and coaches polls and 6 computer rankings that factored in strength of schedule and margin of victory. Now, every poll agreed to acknowledge the winner of the BCS National Championship as the champion, except for the AP poll, which again caused issues. The 2003 season marked the first split, where the BCS named LSU the champion, but the AP poll deemed Southern California the title holder. In the end, Southern Cal was number 3 in the final BCS rankings, behind the number 2 Oklahoma team that lost 35-7 in the Big 12 title game. From there, the BCS expanded to a 10-team format in 2006 and created a BCS National Championship game played a week after all the other bowl games, acting as a standalone contest. But still, it ran into problems of undefeated teams being left out of the title game, like 2004 Auburn and 2010 TCU, or debates about which one-loss teams should play for the title, like in 2000 with Florida State, Miami, and Washington, and 2011 with Alabama and Oklahoma State. Eventually, this led to the College Football Playoff. The CFP debuted with 4 teams in 2014 and grew to 12 in 2024. And the biggest difference between it and the BCS, how teams were ranked. The CFP has its own committee that picks which teams are in and out, a system that has so far eliminated the possibility of a split title. This has also given a lot more teams the chance to compete for a national title without having to be the 2 highest ranked teams. And with the expansion in 2024, the field will include the 5 highest ranked conference champions who will receive automatic bids. It makes you think of teams that would have loved this format, like 2023 Florida State, who became the first Power Conference champion to go undefeated and not make the CFP. Yes, other polls like the AP poll are still well known, but if they select a different national champion, it will be pretty difficult to convince the college football world that the team that won a playoff against the best competition in the country isn't the best of the best.